Okay, go ahead. Welcome, everybody. I'm Amy Davidson. I'm the Executive Director of the Climate Group here in North America, and I am actually in our New York City office. And I'll be the moderator for our Innovation Game Changer series today. And this is our second in our series, and today's topic is what we think is really one of the most important and innovative spaces, albeit nascent, the off-grid renewable energy sector. We host these Hangouts as a way to connect our network, both our states and regional government networks, our corporate partners, as well as impact investors, to what we think are some of the leading entrepreneurs and thought leaders on very interesting issues and ways to tackle climate change. And we have an audience today throughout our global network, and they'll be submitting questions throughout the session. On the right-hand bar, you can type that in. And we'll also be making this Hangout available online afterwards. So welcome. So first question, of course, is why is the off-grid sector so important to us? And I think some of you know, but there are 1.2 billion people on the planet that do not have access to electricity, and 300 million of these people live in India. So providing access to clean, reliable, and affordable electricity for billions of people is really one of the most critical development goals we have, as well as very important as a way to tackle climate change. It's also one of the most innovative spaces right now in terms of designing new ways to scale renewables power as a way to displace dirty and unhealthy fuels. And while the sector is growing, it is still very early on, so we wanted to use today's sessions to really dig in a little bit and understand more of the insights into the business models, sort of the commercial viability we have in this space, the risks and opportunities, so together we can work forward in a way to accelerate the growth of this important sector. As some of you know, the Climate Group launched an Access to Energy program last year with the help of the Dutch Postcode Lottery, and the goal is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions as well as enhance the lives of rural inhabitants in India. So we're very grateful to the Dutch Postcode Lottery for funding this program. It's called Bijli Clean Energy for All. And the Dutch Postcode Lottery, for those of you who are not familiar, they are the second largest charity in the world. And they've been raising funds since 1989 for organizations that work for a greener and fairer world. And 50% of their proceeds from lottery tickets are distributed to charitable organizations in both environmental protection, development cooperation, and human rights. So we thank DPL for their support. So today we're joined by three speakers who are really innovating in this space. The first speaker we have is Piyush Jaju, who's the co-founder and CEO of Onergy, and he's coming to us from Kolkata, India, and he's going to be talking about technology. The second speaker is Ryan Levinson, who is the CEO and founder of SunFunder, based in San Francisco, and he has an innovative financing model. And our third speaker is Debajit Palit, who's the Associate Director at TERI, coming to us from New Delhi, and he has both insights into some of the policy developments in this space as well as technology. So I'm going to ask each of the speakers just to give a 10-minute introduction to their organization and what they're seeing in this sector, and then we're going to open it up to the Q&A. So I'll start with Piyush of Onergy. Again, we're very grateful for you to be here. Onergy was founded in 2009, and it provides a complete suite of solar energy solutions to rural communities in India, from solar lanterns all the way to mini grids. So Piyush, can you start by sharing with us sort of how you got started, why you got started, and how you chose your business model?
Sure. Thank you so much, Amy, for the introduction. So just sharing a little bit of a background on how and why we started. Actually, it was started more for a concern for the environment, initially starting a non-profit and then finally understanding the main critical problems with climate change really lies in starting adoption of clean energy, and people who were bearing the brunt of climate change were there in rural areas. So what we could really do about promoting energy access. So initially the idea was just regards to solar distribution, just into solar lanterns and mini home systems and how we can distribute it in the rural areas, focusing on developing a really strong after-sale service network which could reach remote regions. But then gradually we started realizing that people also have their needs and aspirations, and there is no single silver bullet solution when it comes to energy access. And over the years, right from just being a distribution and service company for micro solar products, we've developed more technical capacity to provide a complete range of solutions, right from, as Amy mentioned, with solar lanterns, home systems, microgrids, and also currently actively looking at developing new solar solutions for solar-powered irrigation, micro cold storage, and also solar computers. And to support these solutions, also working on the energy efficiency side by looking at developing better solar LED lights, televisions, and fans. So our focus is to provide these kind of solutions in remote rural areas where we concentrate our operations on the eastern parts of India, where the electricity and energy problems are the most problematic and adverse. And then subsequently, currently we've scaled up our operations in the 3 states of West Bengal, Odisha, and Jharkhand, currently reaching out to more than 1,000 villages, wherein we have promoted over 30,000 solutions impacting over 150,000 lives till date, since we have been operating for the past over 4 years.
Super. I'm sure we're going to have more questions as we dig in further, but let me just move over to Ryan just to get an overview of how SunFunder is bringing new financing mechanism into the space, and that's sort of one of our challenges. I mean, SunFunder is new. You were founded in 2012. I was lucky enough to meet Ryan in person on my last trip to San Francisco, and it's really an innovative solar finance business to help connect investors with solar projects that improve the lives of low-income communities in Africa, Asia, as well as Latin America. And I think Ryan just raised a second round of financing for SunFunder, which is terrific. And he really has the vision and the passion to be able to provide short-term capital and project finance loans for solar lighting, phone charging, as well as microgrids. So Ryan, do you just want to give us an overview of what you're doing at SunFunder?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thanks, Amy. So as Amy mentioned, SunFunder is a solar finance company dedicated to working with solar businesses that are operating in parts of the world where people lack access to electricity, and in areas where there's a grid deficit, where maybe there is electricity, but the quality is very low, very unreliable. And we see this as a big opportunity to solve a couple very major challenges in the world. My background is in climate and energy policy in the U.S. I used to work at the World Resources Institute, and then after that, solar energy project finance in the U.S., where I worked at Wells Fargo in their solar project finance team. And in 2011, I was spending a lot of time in India and in Southeast Asia, getting to know solar energy businesses that are operating in those markets. And a couple of things struck me that I'm going to just say a couple words, not specifically about SunFunder here, but about the market and why I think this is really important and a really interesting opportunity. First of all, as Piyush said, from a climate change perspective, there's so much focus on reducing emissions, and that's of course really important. But something really struck me when I learned about the fact that in the next couple of decades, 90% of new energy demand is expecting to come from emerging markets. And that if that new energy develops the same way that existing energy infrastructure has developed in the past, that's going to be the equivalent of adding a new US and a new China worth of GHG emissions to the global economy, which I think, as you all know, is a really scary concept. So it's all about creating this new infrastructure in the right way in parts of the world where energy demand is going to be increasing greatly in the coming decades. And the other has to do about the unit economics of solar energy in parts of the world where there's not an existing grid infrastructure. when I was doing solar project finance in the US, so much of what we did depended on subsidies. Even today, you see the US solar market and the solar market in Europe is booming, but you still require subsidies, sometimes valued at over 50% of the cost of the system, and that's even with financing terms of 15 to 20 years. And something that I thought was really fascinating was that for a third of the world, for over 2 billion people where there's either no electricity or really unreliable electricity, solar energy is today economically viable with little or no subsidies and sometimes financing terms of only 1 to 3 years. And when you look at the challenge that we talked about with climate change, but also of energy access, where you have over 1 billion people that lack access to basic energy services, that really struck us as a really big opportunity to solve a problem where the solutions are ready to go. But we realized that the biggest challenge was a lack of access to financing. That solar businesses working in India, in East Africa, and other parts of the world where there's unreliable electricity really lack access to the capital that they need, the inventory finance to purchase their technology and then deploy it in their communities, and project financing in cases where you might be developing commercial projects or microgrid projects or solar projects for cell phone tower base stations. And we decided to start SunFunder, a solar finance company just focused on solving that access to capital challenge. So as Amy said, we started in 2012. Our model is we work with solar companies that are working in these markets, and we develop good, strong, long-term relationships with them. And our goal is to be one of their finance providers over the years and really help them grow and scale. We make loans to them. We only do debt. We don't make equity investments. Our goal is to provide short-term capital, really focused on the deployment of solar energy technologies. And so we're not making equity investments or long-term debt financing so that companies can grow their teams or their operations. It's all focused on the deployment of solar energy projects. And we launched initially as a crowdfunding platform in 2012. And we still have a crowdfunding platform that's up and operating and growing as fast as ever, actually. That was how we raised the capital that we raised to then make the loans that we make to the solar companies. And it's been going really well, but we also realized that for us to get to the scale that we want to get to and to really move the needle in the challenge of energy access, which is going to require hundreds of billions of dollars in the coming decades. And our goal is to, of course, no single finance company is going to solve that challenge, but to really have a meaningful impact, you have to be moving hundreds of millions a year and eventually billions. And to do that, we realized there was a much bigger opportunity to go directly to accredited and institutional investors through private debt placements. And that's now the primary approach we follow to raise capital to then finance solar projects. So we now have a product, an investment product that we offer to accredited and institutional investors called the Solar Empowerment Fund, where you can make short-term investments in notes that we issue, 1 to 3 year notes typically, and you are able to invest in a diversified portfolio of off-grid solar projects. So we have 2 approaches of raising capital. One is through crowdfunding, where anybody can go online and invest as small as $10 in a solar project, and that's at sunfunder.com. And then through these private debt placements. And we've now been in operation for about 2.5 years. We've made 24 loans to 10 different solar companies. 8 of the solar companies are based in East Africa, 1 in the Philippines, and 1 in India. We actually just completed our first India loan to a company called Marigal Power. It was also our first microgrid project, so a really exciting project for us. And we've now made loans of about $700,000 to these 10 companies. We've got 6 loans, 100% fully repaid, and maintain a 0% default rate. So far, the impact of our work is over 100,000 people have now been impacted with access to clean energy through the loans that SunFunder has made. As Amy said, we just we just raised some capital in a Series A round led by Coastal Impact Fund, which we're really excited about. And that's going to help us grow and build our team. We're based right now in San Francisco and in Arusha, Tanzania. So we're going to be growing our teams in both areas and hopefully expanding to India and other markets in the coming years. And we're really interested in meeting more solar companies that we could work with and help grow and scale their businesses and deploy more solar energy. And we're interested in meeting investors that want to help us with the private debt placements that we're raising and are interested in directly investing in solar energy projects, because that's a really important part of what we do as well. So yeah, look forward to answering questions, and thank you.
Super. Thank you, Ryan. Let me move on to, I'm seeing questions coming in already, but I'm going to move on to Debajit he's the Associate Director of the Social Transformation Division at TERI, and he's in New Delhi with us this evening. It's different time zones across the board here. And TERI is by far the most seasoned organization that we have here. I guess you guys were founded in 1974, and you're also the largest with a staff of about 900 people. And I know that you're working in the field of energy access. So why don't you just share briefly what you're seeing in the off-grid space, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, thank you, Amy. Before I start, I just like to introduce TERI. We were started in 1974, and we have been mainly working in the field of energy, environment, and sustainable development, mostly in the research and development sector. However, we have also been implementing projects on specifically action research projects in the field, working with a lot of NGOs in the grassroots level NGOs. And taking the social sector initiative forward, we started the Lighting a Billion Lives campaign in 2007, when we made a commitment to the Clinton Global Initiative that we are going to light up about 2,000 villages and 1 million population within a period of 5 years. And I'm very happy to share that we have been able to achieve our commitment. Last year, we completed impacting 1 million lives across India and some of the other countries, in Africa. This particular program, Lighting a Billion Lives, which we started in 2007, officially launched in 2008. Initially, I'd like to share something about the program. Initially, we started with a model called solar charging station model, by which we are basically promoting the fee-for-service model, where the users would come to a charging station, take a lanterns on rent, and these lanterns are being managed by a village-level entrepreneur, which we select using a certain selection criteria that we follow under the program. And these entrepreneurs are provided this charging station with what TERI used to do is that we raise funds from corporates and other entities, bilaterals and multilaterals, and also we take some equity contribution from the solar charging station entrepreneurs, and that's how the entire setup is done in the villages. And beyond that, the entire operation and maintenance of the station is supposed to be taken care of by the entrepreneur. So we wanted to see that how we can provide the access to clean energy in the remotest of the remote places in India, and at the same time trying to see that the entrepreneurship model is developed, so that going ahead, each of these village level entrepreneurs can also become a sale outlet for the solar lanterns and other off-grid products in these villages, and thereby improve the business environment in these villages. Now, when we started the program, after a few months or we realized that we also need to create a service network in the villages, because just giving a lantern in the villages may not be the right way to ensure sustainability. So we also created an institution called Energy Enterprise, by which these enterprises provide the after-sales support to all these charging stations that has been set up. We also realized that it will be important to have multiple technology options instead of just going ahead with one particular option. And so we diversified into solar DC microgrids, solar home systems, and other technological options in each of these villages. And that's how we can now say that after about 6 years of starting the program, it started since we have now a multiple technology options, a differential business model for different geographies and income level of the population. And we have been able to reach about 2,500 villages across different states in India, impacting around more than 1 million lives. And we are very happy that we have partners like Onergy, Meragaon Power, and many other companies private sector companies as well as grassroots level NGOs who are helping us to take this forward of energy access initiative. I agree with Ryan when he said that access to finance seems to be one of the critical aspects of how you can bring energy access to this rural population, and that's where we try to have innovative financial models whereby you have access to financing from rural banks. We also raise funds under the corporate social responsibility initiatives of different corporates in India, and also try to see that how we can leverage the equity from the local villagers, from the entrepreneurs right at the village level, and see how we can bring together all these funding mechanisms together and create an opportunity for the villagers to have energy access.
Great.
So great.
Super. I'm going to go back and ask just one specific question for energy. And sorry, Debaja, can you go back on mute? If you can. So Piyush, if you can just explain a little bit, because you have so much of a diversity of product offering, I'd love to understand a little bit more about how you're going into these villages and how you decide what's the best product for them, and sort of to Ryan's point also, is this actually the cheapest solution for folks? And can you just walk through a little bit of the economics and how your customers pay for the service?
Right, that's a very good question. So, of course, for different product lines, we have, you can say that we have different models which how we reach out. So mainly what we have seen is that if financing is available, then definitely people's preference is for having a solar home systems for themselves if a bank finance is available to them. But the challenge is in most places that bank finance is not available. So there are areas wherein their customers do not have access to microfinance or banking networks, and wherein we just look at promoting lanterns. In areas where there are already financing options available, and that's where we look into promoting home systems. And in other areas, especially wherein what we have been really actively focusing over the last 1 year has been microgrids, wherein we are typically serving the unbankable, and where there are clusters of people which can also which have more productive activity going on in the evening. So where there are hamlets or villages which are in cluster bases where microgrids make sense, and that's where we look into identifying different villages where we set up these microgrid projects. So a lot depends on the local availability, access to finance, and also what is the income levels of people, and also what is their affordability. So that's how we've kind of divided between different product ranges, wherein we sell our products through cash, through banks, through microfinance institutions, and also looking into more institutional level tie-ups like with Terry, through whom we've been working especially to promote microgrid systems.
Do you have an 80-20 rule on which sector within your product line that you're focusing on, or is it really driven by just the availability of customers to pay for the product?
Right. So typically, what we've seen is that in terms of value, it's probably lanterns constituting about 30%, home systems 20%, and the remaining kind of systems another 30%. So it's kind of a pretty equal mix in terms of value, but definitely in terms of volume, a lot of sales happen of the lanterns in terms of numbers.
So I'm going to open it up and ask a general question before we start digging down into, I think, really this access to capital issue. But as everyone is familiar, that there was just an election in India, and I would love to get, and maybe it's Debajit that has the one perspective on whether Modi's election and his goal to bring solar off-grid electricity to all households in India by 2019, whether you think that's going to be achievable, or what are the expectations of any new policy development now that he's the new head of India?
Thank you, Amy. I think as far as the policy development in India is concerned, we do have certain policies which have been enabling policies which have been very much helpful in promoting off-grid electrification. But having said that, I must say that there are also still a number of limitations as far as off-grid promotion of off-grid interventions in the villages. I would say that we have to divide the off-grid in two parts. One is that how you are promoting a product is something that's different, and you are promoting a service through, say, mini grids or microgrids in the villages. Now you need separate kind of policies for each of these items. Now when you are saying promoting a product, it's more like a consumer product that is being sold in the villages, and you need to have working capital loan. Now most of the districts in India or the provinces in India where you have, say, the energy enterprises or the solar shops which are being set up by various private enterprises or chains like Onergy, I think they don't get enough access to capital from the banks for their working capital requirements to buy a product, to create the inventory and sell it to the users. We need to have policies related to this particular aspect. How you can avail loan from the banks to have your working capital to create the inventory, which is very important because you can't take the products to the last mile, and still you may have to wait for a number of days to actually get the product sold in the villages. So that is something that is important on this one. The second part is that about the mini grids and microgrids, where it is more of creating an infrastructure in the village. It is not like product selling, but you are selling a service and your payback period might be more than 5 years because, or maybe more than that, because you are creating an infrastructure and you are going to get a return on this infrastructure month on and on. So you need low cost capital, whereby this particular segment needs to be treated as an infrastructure lending. So in India, for example, you get an infrastructure lending for many of the bigger power projects at a much lower rate of interest than the commercial rate of interest. Mini grid is still not being considered as infrastructure lending, though it is under the priority sector lending, but in practice it is not being followed. So what we need to have is to implement those mechanisms by which you get access to low cost capital, you get access to long tenure loans, and you get access to certain financing mechanism from the banks. I'll give an example here. For example, you don't have risk mitigation instruments. What we need today is that subsidy is being provided standalone to products or to the mini grids. What we can do is that link up subsidy with how you can improve the IRR for the private sector projects. So you provide the subsidy to improve the IRR, and that's how the private sector will also go to the rural areas to serve the community. And at the same time, the subsidy might be better utilized because then you have performance-based subsidy provided to the private sector, and that might act in a much better way than how it is being done today. So I think certain innovation is required in the entire financial mechanism to make it more effective.
So Piyush, maybe you want to jump in, or Ryan, are you seeing the necessity of subsidies in this market at this point? How much are you relying on them, or are you able to sort of develop the economic case without subsidies?
Sorry, I was muted. For the majority of the work we've done to date has been in East Africa, and the vast majority of the loans we've made in East Africa have not relied on subsidies. There's been a couple of cases where there's been some local subsidies that have supported the economics of the systems we've financed, but the vast majority have not required any subsidies and have been economically viable with loan terms of 1 to 2 years. I think we're not as experienced in India yet. In India, for us, the big challenge has less to do with the economics of solar and more to do with some regulatory issues that make it very challenging for foreign lenders to have flexibility that they need with respect to interest rates and tenors, and most importantly, it's very challenging for a foreign lender to make a loan to a solar company in India and then actually repatriate the money out of the country as interest and principal repayments are made. So in India, we've been dealing more with some regulatory issues and less focused on the economics, but we do believe that the economics for solar in India, for particularly the smaller solar products, solar home systems, and the smaller, more efficient microgrid systems are very strong. And I don't believe I don't believe that subsidies are required in many situations, but I know they exist in some situations as well.
Piyush, do you have a comment?
Yeah, so my take is that there is subsidy money available with the private sources. And when subsidies money is available, then definitely we should get access to that subsidy, so that ultimately the end consumer is paying lesser for the entire system, and it's benefiting the rural households. The problem really happens is that in a lot of cases it's very difficult to get the subsidy, and which really distorts the market, wherein few players are getting the subsidy, or there's a huge delay in getting the subsidies from the government or from other sources. But I think that if, as Bijli was saying, that if we can create a proper system wherein getting subsidy becomes a much more easier process, and government has the funds. There are various different CSR funds, private funds, which are getting into it, who want to support it. So might as well we can just have a more efficient system wherein even say a 20 or 30% subsidy that plays a huge role just to make the systems far more cost effective to the end customer.
Piyush, would you say that they are cost effective though, if there were no subsidies, even if it's not as cost effective as what you're hoping for?
So it's kind of, we can come at par, say, with what their kerosene usage is or what they are currently spending, and we can provide a solar system without subsidy, which would kind of balance the same out, and whatever is their current spend, they would be spending the same for solar. But say if subsidy is available and then suddenly they have to pay 20% less, so automatically their savings increases and the benefit to them increases, and why not give them that benefit?
Right. How much do you think? Am I right that that kerosene is also subsidized in India?
Right, that's correct. But the level of subsidy is definitely is fairly, if you compare it with Africa, it is definitely a lot more subsidized.
Mm-hmm.
Can I make a comment here on this? Yeah, I just like to add that while subsidy, we may have a debate on whether subsidy is required or not, but what is important is that it's the same money which is coming from, say, a government source. How you best utilize that particular fund that is available from the government. Whether you give a direct product subsidy or you utilize it for creating the a network of entrepreneurs in the villages, and also create a network of maintenance service in the villages is very important. I'll give an example from our neighboring country, Bangladesh, where effectively the subsidy on the product is hardly 5 or 6%, but they also give give some money for creating the maintenance services in the villages in the form of institutional development grant, which is about another 10 or 12% of the product price. They also provide very low cost financing to the to all these partner organizations with whom the Infrastructure Development Company of Bangladesh is working. They give a long tenure loan. So all these things may not be directly seen as a subsidy, but these are all benefits that are being given to their partner organization, and which has really helped in promoting energy access in Bangladesh. You must be knowing that they have already crossed 3 million systems, home lighting systems in Bangladesh. So we need to create a mechanism in India whereby you can access to capital, you can access to the different government funding that are available, but in a more flexible and more, I would say, transparent manner to help create the market for the off-grid products.
So what I'm hearing, and I want to then open it up to some of the questions that are coming through online, is we feel we have technology solutions to bring clean energy access to those without it. But what is slowing us down is the very common problem that we see even in developed countries is the access to capital. So what are what would be your wish list of what you would have to sort of unlock some of that capital that's sitting on the sidelines, and whether it is just because it's still considered new technology, or is it because it's really you're dealing with the bottom of the pyramid issue? That could be for anybody.
Well, I think from our perspective as SunFunder, we're seeing a lot of opportunities in India to partner with solar energy businesses who need capital for their projects, and we think there are a lot of really attractive investment opportunities. We would definitely be doing more in India if the regulatory issues that I referenced earlier were not there. So, I believe that there is a great investment opportunity that's ready today. I think there are really strong companies doing really innovative things like Onergy, and the economics of the systems work well, and we think that there are investors, such as the ones that we raise capital from, that are really interested in putting their money to work in this space. But in India in particular, those regulatory issues are really the biggest barrier that we face to deploying more capital in the country.
I think what is important is that we get capital is there, access to capital is there, but access to right kind of capital for particular geographies is very important. So this is very important. I'll give an example here from two of our projects that we are doing, one with Meragao Power and another with a foundation called Milinda Foundation, where in both these cases, we have tried to provide them some viability gap funding, so that their initial investment cost is part of their initial investment cost is taken care of, because they're setting up this microgrids in the villages. And what we have asked them is that when they start getting the revenue from this from their consumers, they have to reinvest a part of that revenue to create more microgrids. Because for us, we are not a financing organization, so we don't take back the money, unlike the other financing organizations. So for us, it is a grant. We have provided a grant, but we have ensured that they are going to reinvest that money to expand the energy access in their area of operation. So you have to have innovative instruments by which you can really expand the energy access. So in our case, while we are now funding around 40% of their cost, but if I take the entire life cycle, say for 5 years, at the end of 5 years, maybe the contribution from us would come down to around maybe 10 or 15%, if I say from the entire period of 5 years, project period of 5 years, because they will be reinvesting the part of that in the cycle. So you really need innovative financing. And for different areas, the financing might be different. India is a vast country, so you have different geographies, where in some part you might need consumer financing. In some areas, you might need a different type of financing to provide the service to the villages. So you have to have a bouquet of financing similar to the suite of technological options that are now available.
Right. So can I quickly jump in, Amy, for what my thoughts are?
Please.
Sure. Thanks. So I totally echo what Debajit and Ryan are saying. It's really the kind of capital that required for this sector. And if I want to break down between the capital that we require for the enterprise, for Onergy, and the capital that we require for financing for the customers. So specifically, we understand the challenges which are there, and with a strong focus on distribution and after-sales service. So the capital that we are getting for our enterprise is patient capital with low return expectations. we've been very clear about this even with our investors. We are not looking at even impact investors who still have high financial returns. Because given the challenges in the space, given the overheads on developing that ecosystem, we are looking for low-cost patient capital and targeting that kind of investors. As for the capital for our customers, I think that's where it becomes really important to have different kind of innovative financing options available. Like especially what Climate Group is supporting for is setting up a revolving corpus through which we can provide credit to our rural entrepreneurs, to microfinance institutions at low rate, so that ultimately the uptake of solar solutions become higher when there is some credit available to entrepreneurs and partners. Again, how we can get low-cost capital available even for our microfinance institution partners, and that they ultimately do not have to lend at the typical 25% for solar solutions if there is low-cost capital available to the MFIs who can subsequently lend for solar. And the same case, like with the great things that SunFunder is doing, is again what I understand is it's capital with interest rates which are less than market interest rates, which is supporting towards project finance and towards financing entrepreneurs, and which is definitely the right direction for us, with different sources, capital being available for the projects that are being undertaken.
So thank you for that. So can you, each of you, just walk through what you think in the next 5 years, how quickly this can grow? Because clearly from a climate change point of view and the access to energy point of view, as Ryan's pointing out, we want to be displacing fossil fuels certainly as the solution. What is sort of the scale? Because our interest, of course, is accelerating this, making everything as commercially viable and mainstream as possible. So is this the regulatory issue? Is it a policy issue that maybe that we're seeing that needs to be adapted better, which I know Debajit mentioned? Or is there something else when you see going out maybe 5 years? Where do you see this market? So I'm asking you to,
yeah, I think the market is definitely is growing. I think there are a lot of market studies have indicated that in India the off-grid market is almost anywhere it's about $2 billion US. I'm sure that it's going to grow like that because we are going to have perennial power problems in India is not going to be solved in immediate future. So in the next 5 years, definitely off-grid is going to have a huge market. But as I said, you have to have different type of markets in different parts of India. It may not be the same everywhere in the entire country. Because, unlike many of the African countries where the market seems to be similar in all the geographies. Whereas in India, you may have to have, you may find different type of markets growing in different parts of India. It might be the market might be better in the northern part of India than in the southern part of India, or it might be better than the eastern part of India where the energy access is really poor as compared to the western part of India. So you really need to identify the areas where the potential is high. So we need to have more market intelligence studies and which can help the private sector to plan their business well and penetrate those areas.
did anyone else want to comment on that? What you see in 5 years for the market? Ryan, I think you're muted.
Sorry.
Okay.
Piyush, go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So my quick take is that for the market to grow, apart from what Debajit said, is that, and as you were mentioning, that we definitely need to have strong regulations and policy in place. Because what has really happened in the last 20 years is that this technology has been there, but what it has created a lot of junk in these rural areas. solar projects have been implemented, products have gone out, and it has stopped working with no after-sale service. So how can we really strengthen the kind of policies which would promote more quality products, or which are the solar projects are awarded to people who can provide reliable maintenance and service, and which should really stand in the case, because what has happened is that in a lot of places we face so much trust deficit that people do not believe in this technology, and which becomes very, very serious. And it takes time for us to prove that, okay, that we are serious people, we can provide great service. That's when you take our products and see how it goes. So I think that we really need to address these critical issues which the sector is facing for us to grow.
Ryan, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, sure. I don't have any specific projections or statistics to share right now on how big I see the market being. And I think my comments are going to be focused not just on India, but the broader off-grid and grid deficit market. I think the growth that we're going to see over the next 5 years and beyond is going to be very, very significant. And I think this market is, while it's been in existence for many years, even decades, and it's true the technologies have been around for a very long time. I do think that over the past like 3 or 4 years, a number of things have happened all in the same 2 or 3 year period that together really I think point to this market being at an inflection point now, where all the kind of ingredients are there for it to really take off. One which is I think something we've covered quite a bit on this webinar is the economics of solar energy, and a lot of you probably know that the cost of solar technology has come down very radically over the past 5 years. And when you combine that with products that are, I think, much more improved and more appropriate for off-grid and grid deficit markets in a way that maybe they weren't 5 or 10 years ago. You see so many new companies now designing products specifically for these markets, where 5 or 10 years ago maybe that wasn't the case quite as much as it is today. But I think maybe most importantly, you're seeing a lot of new innovative business models that are designed to help make solar energy even more affordable for people in parts of the world where there's unreliable energy. One example is on the end user financing side. You're seeing a lot of solar businesses themselves now through innovative models like pay-as-you-go solar and new types of microgrid pricing structures, enabling their customers to afford solar energy in a way that doesn't rely on an end user consumer banking product, where you no longer need to have a microfinance institution that's active and interested in working in solar energy to make solar energy affordable for end users, because you're seeing a lot of solar companies now starting to serve that role themselves by creating their own end user financing products. That's one of, I think, a number of different types of business models that are enabling the adoption of solar energy in these markets. And then mobile money, particularly in Africa, is also really helping to facilitate some of these new business models. And you're also just seeing a lot of new companies enter the space that are becoming quite sophisticated and really focused on on these business models and really have a strong focus on growth and scale. I think when you kind of combine all those things together, it's really setting the stage for a lot of significant growth in the coming years. And it's still messy, it's still new. We still look at this as a nascent sector, but we think in the coming years there's going to be some business models that get proven out to be very scalable and successful, and then you're going to see a lot of other new players start to copy those, which is a great thing. And we expect major growth in this space.
So I'm going to ask a question also from one of our online viewers here, which is more of the challenge from the incumbent power sector in India or elsewhere, and what do folks see as, do you think you'll be able to work closely together with the existing, or will you be considered a real disruptor in developing a completely different model? And what kind of pushback is happening in India from the incumbents?
Yeah, can I? Yeah, I think one point that I would like to mention is a very good question. One point that I would like to mention here is that, of course, still we have a politically for the off-grid sector to grow. It is very important that that you have certain stability in the villages where you are setting up these mini grids or micro grids. Especially, I'm talking of the mini grids and micro grids, which are being set up by the private sector now. What is happening not just in India but almost in all the countries across the world wherever I have visited, either in Africa or in other countries in South Asia, is that you don't have a clear-cut position by the government on whether you are going to extend the grid in those areas or you are not going to extend the grid in those areas. So there is always an uncertainty that the grid is going to be extended or not, and so the private sector do not go and set up the infrastructure there. So what is important from the government side is that on how we bring in certainty into the sector, whether the government is going to extend the grid or they're not going to extend the grid, and leave that particular space for the private sector to develop that market. So this is one thing that is very important. Having said that, I think going ahead, India is likely to have a better coordination. We used to have two different ministries. One is the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, and the other is the Ministry of Power. And historically, they were doing things which are quite separate from each other. The Ministry of Power also has a decentralized distributed generation program, which takes up villages which are not connected by grid. The Ministry of New and Renewable Energy also has a program called Remote Village Electrification, which again takes up villages which are not connected through grid. So there was a lot of conflict and a lot of duplication by both these ministries. However, now with the recent government coming in, the minister for the Ministry of Renewable Energy and Ministry of Power are same. Is the same person who is managing both the ministries right now. So we hope that there will be better coordination between these two ministries, and there will be some policy directions would come in the near future, maybe in the next few months or in the next on how we can see a better coordination between these two ministries to see how the off-grid areas can be served. I'm very hopeful that things are likely to improve.
Great. We are getting very close to the end of time here, which it goes by so quickly. I would love if each of you just could quickly wrap up and just share with the audience the sort of what was the one lesson, the hardest lesson you learned from your experience to date, and how will you bring that forward, that lesson learned? Ryan, why don't I start with you?
I think maybe for me, coming from a background where I've worked on solar projects in the U.S. and where from the time I started doing solar in the U.S., the market was just tiny, just getting started, and within 4 or 5 years, it was this enormous market, with 100 megawatt projects getting, funded left and right, and it just developed very, very quickly. I think patience is one thing, and I know that when you're concerned with climate change, patience isn't really something that is very acceptable, because, well, that's just the way it is, unfortunately. But I think in these markets, this isn't gonna happen overnight. You're not gonna have an off-grid clean energy sector that within 5 or 10 years is going to completely completely revolutionize the energy sector in this market. I do believe it's going to happen. I think everything's ready to go, but it's going to take time to figure it out, and some companies aren't going to make it. It's going to be a little messy, but I do believe it's going to happen. But it's not going to happen overnight.
Piyush?
Yeah, so I think that from my side, over the last 5 years since I've been involved, there is so much of wealth of knowledge in the rural areas. A lot has just been unlearning on and just breaking the preconceived notions that we have, and really trying to understand what their needs are, what their aspirations are, and then jointly working together to provide appropriate solutions. And that has been the biggest take back. Like we talk about changing the world and other things, but I think I have changed so much as a person just by whatever I've learned from them.
That's terrific. And Debajit?
Yeah, I think the two hardest thing that you wanted us to share is that to me, as far from our experience of the Lighting a Billion Lives program, is that reaching the last mile is not a big issue, or is not that a big problem. But how you really maintain those services to the last mile is really a big challenge. The other thing is that how you can create an integrated mechanism by which you can provide access to technology, finance, and service to the last mile population is really challenging. It's very difficult to bring all the three together into a basket and then provide it to the villages. So these are two things that we have really learned the hard way. I'd like to add here also is that in villages we have seen the aspiration of the community rises every day. So you give the lighting solutions to the villagers, they would like to have something more than that. And how you meet that aspiration level within a limited budget, and also given the fact that they have a very low paying capacity, is also a big challenge. And that's something that we really have to work and use all our brains to work together to see how we can meet that aspiration level.
Well, great. Well, on that note, I want to thank you all. I just think we're privileged at the Climate Group to be working with the three of you and help accelerate this sector forward as quickly as we can, but of course being mindful that we all do need to be patient, as well as realize that we learn from others, and certainly none of us have all the answers, and that there's a nice wide universe working to solve these problems. So thank you. I also want to thank our team in London, Sebasker, as well as here in New York, both Kirsten as well as Sarah Parrish on my team. And of course there's our whole social media team, Claire Saxon, who's been helping put this together and tweeting it out. So again, I appreciate everybody. I appreciate everybody that joined us online, and I hope you've got a good sense of what some of the insights into the sector is and some of the ways forward that we will work on together. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. Thanks, everybody.